Welcome, everybody, to Indiana Basketball Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster. Right now I want to welcome in my co-host, a member of the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame, and the last game he ever played in, he cut down the nets. Help me welcome to the show, Steve Risley. How you doing, Steve?
Mike, how you doing this evening? We're doing great, fine. Getting ready to start the season here this weekend, and light this candle. We'll see what we got going on, and see how good this basketball team is going to be. If we're going to live up to the predictions of the Archie Miller era.
Yeah, and as you talked, it's been nearly 33 weeks since officially being named the 29th men's basketball coach in Indiana University history. Archie Miller will coach his first game that really matters in Bloomington. And, expectations are high. Last year, the bottom dropped out of the Crean era. They're coming off. They ended up losing in the NIT to Georgia Tech. So they're going to be playing Indiana State, first game of the season. They have had 2 preseason games. And I think the biggest question coming into the season for the Indiana Hoosiers was taking care of the basketball and playing defense. What did you see in those first 2 preseason games that would give us any indication if this has improved or not?
Well, I looked at the stats here from both games, and against U of Indy, Indiana only committed, 8 turnovers, and only 10 against Marion. So I like that. I think that's probably an all-time low for the Crean era in terms of turnovers. And again, you're still early in the season, so there's still a lot of sloppy mistakes that are going to be made as things start to gel. But when you're talking, 8 turnovers in one game and 11 in another, even in a preseason game against what we would think would be inferior talent, it tells me that they're working on ball control and working on ball handling a lot. And I like that because, a lot of mistakes, are unforced errors, self-inflicted mistakes. And so definitely you're seeing an improvement there overall. Other than that, in the first 2 games, I really don't know that we can glean much of anything because of the complex of the opponents we were playing. What I thought would happen we're seeing some balanced minutes played by a lot of players, which I like, which means he's giving a lot of players a lot of chance to vet themselves a little bit right now in front of this coaching staff and show what they've got on in a uniform and on court experience against not just another practice player. Balanced scoring. I think there were maybe 4 or 5 players in double figures against Marion, and there were 3 in double figures against U Indy, but not the same people leading the scoring. So no dominant score has showed itself yet. Not a lot of turnovers. We controlled the boards pretty much on both games. 47-31 against Indy on the rebounds, and 41-31 against Marion. So we're getting in good position to get rebounds. Transition's good because we're not making a lot of turnovers. Balanced scoring, and a lot of minutes played by a lot of players early. That's what I was looking for in these first 2 games. I really think it's unrealistic to think that anybody was going to take anything else away from it. When we got out of it, apparently without any injuries are going to cause a drop in minutes or a lack of minutes from anybody. So overall, I'd say the first 2 games successful for what my expectations were. And, now we move on to an opponent who has already played a Big Ten team in Purdue. I think you had indicated that they had beaten Indiana more times than they had lost Indiana in the last 5 outings.
Yeah, they've won 3 of the last 5 times the teams have played, but teams have not played in a decade or a little over a decade.
Right. So they're all of a sudden coming into this now, in the beginning of the Miller, for real era, let's say. There's some things on the table here now. There's some in-state pride that's going to be thrown around a little bit. And a little bit of feeling that they can play and run with Indiana, having won the last, 3 to 5 games. The Indiana's on both their jerseys. One says state and one just says university, but it's still there. And so, they faced a good Purdue basketball team early, and so they've banged around a little bit and they played. I don't think this is by any means going to be a pushover game for Indiana at all. I think it's solely an advantage to be playing this game in Bloomington to start the season. But this is a game that if Indiana doesn't take itself seriously, as they've proven 3 of the last 5 times, can lose this ball game. And I think that's a good test for this program early on.
Yeah, and Indiana State last year, led by head coach Greg Lansing, were 11-20, so they didn't have the greatest season, to say the least. In the preseason, they beat Purdue they lost to Purdue 94-72. They beat Marion, the same Marion team IU beat. They beat Marion 84-64. I think their best player has to be Brenton Scott. He was the only player they had that averaged in double figures last year. He's a guard that averaged 15.9, 5 rebounds, almost 3 assists. He's also 208 career three-pointers. And then another interesting player is Tyreek Key from Tennessee, who's a freshman coming in who scored over 3,200 points in his career down there. He led his team to the state championship in Tennessee. So I think right now, I mean, like you said, my concern is they've played at this level against Purdue. Indiana hasn't. And they're going to play at IU. You want to talk a little bit about the environment they're going to get at IU? Because if I'm an Indiana State coach, that may be the thing I'm most worried about right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to be a sellout game nonetheless. There'll be a fair amount of Indiana State people making the trek down State Road 46 from Terre Haute into Bloomington to visit as well. But it'll be sold out. And there'll be a lot of support for Archie to start his time off right and to, christen this team. So it's definitely going to be a crowd favorite toward Indiana. Of course, every game at Bloomington is. We know that. But this one has the hoopla and hype of a rebirth of Indiana basketball, so to speak. And so Indiana State's going to have to deal with that. But the game against Purdue, was it at Purdue?
Yes.
Yeah, so they've already faced that. I mean, it's the same thing for Purdue. I mean, they faced, Mackey is just as tough to play in as Assembly Hall, and they've already faced that up there as well. So I don't know how much it's going to faze them. I think this team has a strong backcourt based on your evaluation of the Indiana State basketball team. And, if we've heard any touting of Indiana this year, it's been that we probably have a stronger backcourt than the average Big Ten backcourt at least, and I'm being probably a little soft-spoken there on that. So it's a good matchup to see how good our backcourt is, how good the Indiana State kids are going to respond, come out. And like I said, there's a lot of emotional into this game, probably more than the physicality involved because we're so young and so unproven. And there's just probably this game's going to ride a lot on emotion. So I expect Indiana to get the upper hand there, obviously, because just the atmosphere alone.
Yeah, last year, Indiana State, I did watch them a few times since I went there for a little bit, but they did have a problem in the front court. They didn't really have a defensive presence in the middle. And they do have a junior college transfer, Devin Thomas, who I think will make an immediate impact. He blocked 100 shots last year at Mineral Area College. I didn't think that would be that hard to say when I just read it until it came out of my mouth. He's also from Richmond, Indiana. He was ranked as one of the top 30 junior college players in the country last season. So you look at that. Plus they've got senior Brandon Murphy, who is 6'7", 275 pounds. He was third last year in the Missouri Valley Conference in block shots. So this could be a team that I don't think offensively is going to have a huge threat for IU. But I think hitting the boards is going to be huge to win in this game because they got a couple shot blockers here that can rebound the basketball.
Yeah, and physicality will come into play. Maybe not athleticism, but definitely, early in the season, physicality counts because everybody's still a little rusty and rugged and playing more physical basketball than they are athletic basketball. That starts to come as each player refines his game and they refine their adaptability to the team's goals. So, the things in night 4 there are their guard play against our guard play, which seems to be the strength of both teams. The ability to control the emotions involved in the game for Indiana not to get caught up in the hype of the night, and to take the young players and stay within the system for the first time against what we'll call a more bona fide opponent, maybe than a Marion or UIndy.
And the other thing that I found out by reading about them, which I find interesting, which is what I brought up, is Indiana State beat Illinois in a secret scrimmage a few weeks ago. And from what everybody's saying here, they look really good in that scrimmage. Now, I don't know how good Illinois is going to be this year, but we don't know how good Indiana is going to be this year yet either. No.
I mean, it's got all the markings of, like I said, it's an emotional basketball game. If I know that's how we'd be coached to, if we were sitting in the locker room before the game, and we were all of the age and caliber that Indiana faces right now, I know that we'd be talking about controlling our emotions in this game and not letting Indiana State get in the game. We talked earlier about turnovers. Controlling the basketball is key because every time you make a turnover, it puts another chink in your armor and just gives Indiana State just a little bit more confidence. So, and an opportunity to score, an easy breakaway basket or an easy basket. So, ball control controls the emotion, controls tempo. Tempo controls, the way the game rolls. And then you go from there. And then we got to play physical basketball. Again, we want to try and get through this and not get anybody hurt. I think if you go past Indiana State, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, in a little bit, but we have a very time-consuming schedule coming up beyond Indiana State. And we're probably up and through Thanksgiving or past playing a game every 2 to 3 days now. And, that's going to test our stamina a little bit to see how good a shape we're in, test our ability to play strong and to stay out of injury situations, and to be able to adapt and learn new opponents quickly. So this is the start of a good little preseason mix for IU. I think it's a good opponent. It's going to give us enough of a game that we're going to test ourselves a little bit, but I don't think it's like playing Duke on December 10th or November 10th and opening up with them on a game that we probably wouldn't really be capable of winning at this point in time.
All right, so do you have a prediction on this game, score-wise?
I'd say, without having seen Indiana State play and watch some of the IU games, but looking at the stats and what Indiana State's bringing to the court, I would think Indiana should easily be a 15-point favorite in this game. I think emotions are going to ride. And, I think a lot of this game, again, falls back on Coach Miller. Can he take that emotion and can he apply it to his system? And it's a good test to see if he can do that. If he does that, I think they win pretty handily. If he doesn't, Indiana State's a good enough basketball team to give him a dogfight and possibly beat him.
All right,
and
so
nothing more fun for an opponent to come into Assembly Hall and win.
All right, you were close. Indiana's favored by 14 in this game.
There you go. See,
you could be an odds maker, Steve. You could be an odds maker.
No. Gambling is illegal at Bushwood, and I never slice.
Okay, but you could always just move to Vegas and be a bookie or something. It's legal there.
No, I don't gamble. I understand.
Life's a big enough gamble in itself.
I understand that those lights in Vegas are there for a reason, and somebody's paying for them, and it's not the hotels.
Yeah, that's what I always try to tell everybody. So me and my wife went to the casino here a couple times, and we went into one time, and she stuck some money in a slot machine, and we won like $300. We left immediately and went to dinner.
Mm-hmm.
We got the hell out of there.
Last time I was in Vegas, we went and saw Donnie and Marie. We went and saw Bette Midler. We went and saw Jersey Boys, and we left. And that was it.
But all right, so we got a few other IU relevant things, or at least one other IU relevant news that happened with Coach Bob Knight, or former Coach Bob Knight. Ripped into UCLA's John Wooden a little bit, and what he said about Wooden was this: I have a lot of respect for Wooden as a coach, how he coached. He was a good coach, Knight said in an interview. He said, but from then on, and I don't mind saying it, I don't respect Wooden because he allowed Sam Gilbert to do whatever it took to recruit kids. What's your take on this?
Well, I think I probably once again, and been paying attention to some of the Twitter feeds and everything that have come across on it. Again, it's a let's re-crucify Knight one more time, for ripping on John Wooden. I actually saw the interview where he discussed Wooden. I saw most all of the interview, actually, that he did with Joe Buck. And, he was very cordial towards John Wooden. I mean, he spoke very highly of him, how much he respected him as a coach, respected him as a person, and the values that he put into his program. But he did, make face, and he said he had a discussion with John Wooden one time about Sam Gilbert, and that Wooden didn't know what to do with Sam Gilbert. For those of people that don't know, and it's legend, obviously, but it's legend not known just by Bob Knight lovers, or whatever you want to call them, is that was pretty well known that what was going on at UCLA and how Gilbert, was, I believe, a car salesman, but pretty much bringing the players in. And Wooden was pretty well told to coach the team that he was given to put on the court, and he was a master at doing that. I think that's really what Knight was just trying to point out, and that, one of the comments made was that, as I said, Wooden made comment to Knight one time, according to Knight, that he didn't know what to do with Sam Gilbert, and Knight said, well, I'll tell you what I'd do with him. I'd boot him out of the program as fast as I could. Well, maybe Knight had that kind of power at IU. I don't think Wooden probably had that kind of power at UCLA at that point in his coaching career.
I don't know. I think by the time you get to the early 1970s, he might have.
But, does he want to? I know. It's a system that worked. And you have to remember, too, recruiting was a different cat back then. It was like recruiting was like the Wild Wild West. There were laws and there were sheriffs in every town, but, trying to control all the things going on in the Wild Wild West was not as easily as it is to do today. So I think that the advent of recruiting practices and what were being done and what were the rules were and the ability to enforce them were significantly different for John Wooden than they were for Bob Knight than they are for Archie Miller. If you really want to start making those kinds of claims. I know when I was recruited, there were things that went on when I was being recruited that would be caught and captured today, would not be allowed to be done today. It'd be noted immediately that things were done. And all the hoopla, I remember when I was playing at IU, I'd go down once a year and I'd fill my back end of my car with basketballs, and I'd say, Coach, sign these balls because I'm going to have the Heart Association, the Children's Make-A-Wish Foundation, the Alzheimer's Association, all of them want an autographed Bob Knight ball to raffle off to raise money. And Knight would look at me and scowl, and he would sign all the balls and, tear me a new rear end while he was doing it. And I would go on my merry way, and I'd have a trunk full of basketballs to when people called me and said, hey, Steve, can you get me a Bob Knight ball for the Make-A-Wish Foundation auction? Yeah, here, I got one right here. I'll bring it right over. I went to try to get a couple Tom Crean balls signed, and I had to go through the ethics committee, through the NCAA compliance committee. I had to get a letter with a tax ID number from the Make-A-Wish Foundation. I had to get a letter requesting what the ball was going to be used for, the disclosure statement, saying it was not going to be sold on eBay. It was just going through hoops. So it's a little different for John Wooden than it was now. But by no means was Knight ripping on John Wooden in any way, shape, or form. I know that all the times that I ever was in presence of Knight, and I was in the presence of Knight and Wooden together a couple of times. There was a tremendous amount of respect. If I think anything, I think Wooden probably didn't like Knight as much as Knight liked Wooden, just because I don't think Wooden cared for Knight's antics on the court. But I think they mutually respect each other as coaches.
Yeah, and the thing about Sam Gilbert, the Sam Gilbert thing is something that can't be denied, though. In 1981, UCLA was forced to vacate the 1980 national championship appearance because of 9 recruiting violations. And I know there's a quote from Wooden who once said that maybe I had tunnel vision, but I still don't think he's had any great impact on the basketball program when he was talking about Sam Gilbert. And I just think you go back to the 60s, though, Lucius Allen, who was a star at UCLA, said he listened to Coach Wooden as long as we were between the lines, but outside of the court, Sam Gilbert's the guy that ran the program. Right.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think that's a big revelation or big secret. And I just think that Knight was just voicing his opinion of that statement that everybody already knew. But once again, Twitter creates opportunities for people who don't know jack about what they're talking about to talk about anything they want to talk about and spout their opinion off and spit it out without knowing the facts.
And there was the New York Times did an investigative series in 1981 on it, and there were 45 people connected with the basketball program who established Gilbert as a one-man clearinghouse who had enabled players and their families to receive goods and services, usually at big discounts and sometimes at no cost at all. So if you do any kind of investigation on what Bobby Knight said, you'll find out that he was dead on this, and there is irrefutable evidence that he is right. And John Wooden won a lot of games, but the question is, without Sam Gilbert, how many national championships does he win?
Well, if is the middle word in life, okay? It's the way it is. If is not really something we can go back and relive because it's history. He won them. They won them. You still had to put a basketball team on the court. You had to get the team to play together.
But when you get to do things other teams don't to put that team together, Steve, that makes it a little bit unfair.
And I will tell you this, not having been recruited in that era of 1975 to 77, UCLA was not germane to the only team exhibiting those practices.
Yeah, but the thing is this, when Bobby Knight speaks about it, there's no NCAA sanctions ever against Bobby Knight when he was at Indiana or when he was at West Point. So I think that Bobby Knight can speak on this because he was a man that, whether people like it or not, had integrity when it came to the team he put on the court and the way those kids were when they were at that school.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, I am not the first one ever to say that Knight is a perfect character and not a flawless individual by any stretch of the imagination. He has his quirks, as do anybody. But when it came to integrity, there were three things that Knight expected. He expected perfection, he expected accountability, and he expected integrity. And, wins would come if you respected all of those things. If you were accountable for your actions, if you had integrity, and if you reached for perfection every time, then you were going to win basketball games. And I think John Wooden, except for the Sam Gilbert issue, probably exemplified many of those things. So I think we're, once again, it's sensationalistic news. We're trying to make something out of nothing again. It's just another opportunity to rip on Knight. Haters are going to hate no matter what happens. I mean, it goes on, and some people can't get over him not coming back for, this reunion or that reunion or going to this Hall of Fame induction ceremony. I say this, and I responded to somebody. I said, look, this whole deal with Knight, this is his battle, not mine, not ours, not the 81's team, not the 76 teams, not the 87s, not any player going into the Hall of Fame. We've all moved on. We've all moved on past it. We had a lot of fun in the 81 reunion. I don't know that I would have had any more or any less fun had Knight been there. I don't know that it would have made a hell of a difference to me one way or another. Those of us trust me, we see Knight, the players, there are players that get together that see Coach 3 to 4 times a year, which is all I really want to see him. I don't really care to see him any more than that. I mean, it's fine, but we have a private dinner with him, and he comes into town occasionally, and we get together, we tell stories, and we all go about our way. We're fine with it. It's just everybody else isn't. And again, this whole thing about Wooden, he did not rip Wooden. He did not call out Wooden. He simply said he did not respect the way that the recruiting practice went on at UCLA, and he acknowledged the fact that it was Sam Gilbert, not John Wooden.
Yeah.
So that's the end of that story.
All right, the next story, we got a ball again in the news, LiAngelo Ball. Authorities believe that him and some other basketball players from UCLA shoplifted from a Louis Vuitton store near the UCLA team hotel outside of Shanghai in China. The Bruins were to play in China against Georgia Tech on Saturday in the season opener. The players were arrested Tuesday after local law enforcement came to the team hotel and questioned both UCLA and Georgia Tech players before taking the 3 away. What they face now bears little resemblance, Steve, to the legal system in the United States. The three could be detained for more than a month without American-style bail before local prosecutors even decide whether to press charges or not. And according to William Ni, a Hong Kong-based researcher of the Chinese court system for Amnesty International, Ni said it is not uncommon for a defendant to wait 30 to 37 days before being officially indicted. Among those indicted, though, Chinese prosecutors enjoy a 99.2% conviction rate, according to Ni's research. So it looks like LeAngelo Ball and a couple other guys could be in a little bit of trouble, Steve.
Yeah, the last I heard, I read something today that said they actually had admitted guilt. So they admitted that they shoplifted sunglasses, apparently is what it was. Now, that's what I've read. Having just come off of a dissertation on why you shouldn't believe everything you read, I'm telling you that's the last I've heard. So they've admitted guilt. I don't know if that's in an effort to speed up the process of getting them out of China or not. We could talk for hours on to what is responsible there. I go back to the same three principles: perfection, integrity, and accountability, and how they are lacking in programs and how they're, put into play in the programs. I don't think in my era that would have ever happened with an Indiana basketball team. I think one coach would have kept us so busy and so organized we never would have had time to run to a Louis Vuitton store and do things on our own.
Did they even have Louis Vuitton when you were in college?
No, I don't think they even had Louis Vuitton when we were there. I remember we went to Hawaii in the 1980 Rainbow Classic, and as we're flying out, I looked down out of the plane and I go, "Holy cow! There's a beach here." We didn't even. I'm being a little facetious there, but
was that when you were leaving or coming in?
Leaving. we came in at night, so we didn't see the ocean. And we came in, we landed, we got on our buses, we went right to the North Shore of Oahu when the games were being played in Honolulu. And we just went through the middle of the island, or however you can get there, and went to practice, came back, went to games. And then it was after we got beat by Pan American in the last game of Hawaii. That was a critical mistake. And then next year I go back and get married in Hawaii with my wife. So, but at
least you didn't make you guys walk home after you lost the game.
I think a few of the players took a separate flight home. Actually, that's another story to tell at some point in time. But a few of the players did not take the team plane home because of that loss. But we flying off, and as a joke, I tell people I didn't even realize there was a beach in Hawaii until we got on the plane to go home. In other words, the point there is that our time was so consumed and so regulated as to what we were doing. And culturally, he would set up things for us to go do. There were obviously in China there are so many historical documents and sites and things to go see in that country. What a once in a lifetime chance to go there and visit the country. To be giving players that much free time to go create mischievous things. Now, my understanding was, too, there were 3 Georgia Tech players with them as well, too, that were dismissed, correct? Am I correct in that assumption? Or?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, so, it's an unfortunate situation. It's very unfortunate for UCLA. It's very unfortunate for Steve. It's very unfortunate for the players. I don't know, I can't talk enough about the code of ethics or conduct in China as to if they're really going to keep them there. My understanding is, I read too, they will not be on the team plane Saturday. They will not be flying home with the basketball team on Saturday. Now, I don't know if admission of guilt speeds up the process to getting them. I'm sure they've had to surrender their passports. That's usually the first thing that happens to you when you're, accused of some crime or something in a foreign country. But, like I told my son when he was going down to Mexico for senior trip, you're not in America. You break laws over there. It's down in Mexico. It's different. They throw you in a stinky, rotten jail and they let you sit for 3 or 4 days and let the other Mexicalis beat up on the gringos. And, while they're in the comfort of a nice hotel, I'm sure right now, they're not living by American laws and rules. And I mean, that's something that needs to really be impressed upon these kids when they decide to, think about acting silly. So it's unfortunate. Like I said, it's an unfortunate situation. It's unfortunate for the relations between China and the United States. We've put China in an awkward situation where they have cultures and laws they have to live by. We're trying to rebuild a relationship or change a relationship with them, whatever Trump's trying to do with them. It wasn't a well thought out plan over a pair of sunglasses that I think most of the kids probably had the money to afford anyway from whatever other method of getting it. I know the Ball's got the money to get him the sunglasses. So the other kids I don't know about.
Did Sam Gilbert die? Is that why they had to go steal?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that.
Need to dig Sam up. He'd get him out of trouble. All right, we talked about this before off air, but you want to touch on the most underrated players in Indiana history tonight?
I started trying to go through that. I mean, in what period of time are we looking at? I mean, because
I would say just from the night period on.
From the night period on?
Yeah, so be 71 to now?
Underrated players. I mean, here's the deal at Indiana University. Many players start off as an underrated player and become a rated player because they gained the trust of Coach Knight as an underrated player and earned more playing time. And I read a quote from Dockage, and, Dan, I don't think is a huge fan of Knight's for whatever reasons. Some valid, some not. But, he said the one thing he would always respect Coach Knight for was you earned your minutes. You earned your playing time there. And that I think that holds true. So a lot of the players you talk about being underrated, you got to look at a kid like one that came to my mind was Wayne Radford. I thought Wayne was just a very underrated basketball player. Well, he was a well-known name because he was on the 76 team. But, he really did that as a freshman, then came in and labored for 2 or 3 years trying to rebuild that program. And really, while the Mike Woodsons were being developed, the Ray Tolberts, the other players who were coming into the program, here's Wayne, who's providing a lot of that Quinn Buckner-like leadership and seniority to that young basketball team and really sacrificing a lot of his own skill sets and abilities to help Knight rebuild the IU basketball program after the 76 team. Jimmy Thomas was obviously, but Jimmy's one of those kids.
You keep naming him because that was the first guy I was going to name.
Who, Wayne Radford or Jimmy Thomas?
No, Jimmy Thomas.
All right, well, go ahead. You talk about Jimmy Thomas.
You should have known that, too. We've had this discussion before. But, yeah, I always like Jimmy Thomas. I think people forget that he was part of the 1981 Final Four All-Tournament team. I think he grabbed 9 rebounds off the bench and placed Ted Kitchell, who got in foul trouble in the championship game. But
I came in for Kitchell.
I know, but that's not what it said on the article I read.
Ted got into foul trouble first 5 minutes of the game and never came back into the game, and I'm the one that came in for it. So just hold your horses there on that one.
All right, well, my next most underrated player would be Steve Risley, who played on the 1981 team. You want to tell us a little bit about Steve?
Well, no. Again, I don't see myself as an underrated player. I don't see that because I think underrated players go on to become rated players, and I don't think I ever became a rated player at IU. I never became somebody like a Jimmy Thomas. Jimmy Thomas started off as an underrated player, but he became a player, a dominant force on that basketball team. After
but when people think of that team, they don't really. Jimmy Thomas doesn't come to their minds a lot of times. That's kind of how I think. I think he was underrated.
I would disagree with you on that. I think that Jimmy made his mark on the 81 championship tournament. I think he really came on strong, and he provided a lot of key minutes. There were only really 7 kids that played in that championship game, and it was basically the starters, and then it was Jimmy and I were the only really 7 players who got any substantial minutes at all in that game. So, and obviously, Jimmy handling the ball was a lot more in the forefront and doing things of that nature, but I think he became a very rated player in that program at some point in time.
And I think another guy like that was Joe Hillman, who his sophomore year, freshman or sophomore. He played a significant role in that NCAA tournament, and by the time you rolled over a couple years later, the 88-89 season, I mean, he started all 34 games, and how many people ever did that for Knight? Because he'd usually get mad at him at least once during the season and bench him.
Yeah. No, and I see underrated players as people that Knight doesn't gush over. It's on senior night. Like, Joe Hillman was the best thing since sliced bread on senior night. Jimmy Thomas was the best thing since sliced bread on senior night. Hell, Knight didn't even know I was a senior on senior night. So really, what are you doing standing up there with Eisenbarger and Grunwald and Ray Tolbert? I'm like, I'm a senior. He goes, you're a senior? So things like, anyway, I don't think so. I wasn't one of the players he gushed over, so I don't see myself fitting in that role. But, yeah, Joe's another one, though. But he's one of those underrated players who came to, earn his spot through hard work, steady play and minutes. And
wasn't he a minor league baseball player at one point? Or did he play baseball at all? I remember something about baseball with him.
Joe's a scratch golfer. He's a multi-time club champion up in Indianapolis at the course he belongs to, which is the toughest course in the city. So I know he's won the club championship there multiple times. A very good golfer. Another one that I thought of when we were talking about this was Daryl Thomas.
Daryl Thomas? Yeah, that's another one who in '87 came up big when he needed to.
Came up big when those kids that just made contributions quietly along the way, and then when called upon to perform at a higher level, he stepped up and performed admirably and did the things he needed to do. But people need to understand that's how Knight's system is built toward taking underrated players and making them, stars. So,
did you smack your dog while we're on air?
No, I did not smack my dog when I'm on air.
Smack the dog.
I did not smack my dog when I'm on the air.
I was actually interviewing Christian Okoye one night, and this dog started barking. And you could hear him smack him, and I said, "Did you smack your dog?" And he said, "Yes, I did."
I'm getting letters from people already. I don't need PETA after me too now, please.
Well, maybe for the Indiana Howard preview, we'll have your dog come on and discuss the game.
My dogs. I love my dogs.
Well, it could just be a slight correction, Steve.
Pardon?
But Daryl Thomas, get back on that.
Daryl Thomas fits that bill. I thought, well, another one who I really liked as an underrated player, again, he came into very strong prominence, was Jordan Olds.
Yeah.
Jordan is a kid who started, high school in Bloomington, was a local product, kind of almost an afterthought as part of that basketball team, really. And look at the way he left Indiana. I mean, he left as a beloved player.
Yeah.
And, so I think the thing about Indiana basketball is it's always been peppered with those kinds of players. Sure, there are the Oladipos, the Cody Zellers, the Mike Woodsons, the Scotty Mays.
I think Holmes was a Bloomington kid, too, wasn't he? Didn't he go to Bloomington State or Bloomington South?
Yeah. And, I mean, Jordan's doing exceptionally well over in Europe playing basketball right now. He's come back. He's got a foundation that makes contributions in Bloomington through his foundation and does a lot of good things for the program and for the community, and really has become a really favorite player for IU. But that's what happens. A lot of these guys start that way. Abernathy, but although I don't think Abernathy was ever underrated, I think Abernathy was just one of the greatest role players that Indiana's ever had. He's probably the poster child for role players.
Well, I mean, Indiana had a lot of role players, but that's kind of like what Knight wanted. He wanted to fit his team in with the five pieces that fit the puzzle the best, and I think he did that better than anybody. That's why he was so successful.
Yeah, I would look at myself more as a role player. Knight never thought I had an issue with considering myself underrated. The phrase he used most often with me was, Risley, if I could buy you for what you're worth and sell you for what you think you're worth, I'd make a lot of money off of you. Now process what I just said, see if you understand it. So yeah. I was more of that role player who thought I should be scoring the same amount of points that Woodson should have, so it didn't fly either. But anyway.
Maybe in the same situation you would have.
Yeah. It got kind of fuzzy after that. I think there was that down period where we started losing a little interest in IU basketball. And, you know, you had your stars kind of carrying the team, and that was kind of the credo of Crean for all those years, was he was under really more of a star system than a role player system. So
yeah, and I think we're getting back to the way it was with Archie Miller. At least it looks like that way to me from the beginning.
I think so. Yeah, and watching Archie coach, I think you're not going to see a 30-point-a-game score for him. I think you're going to see a lot of balanced minutes, a lot of balanced scoring. The same thing you saw probably more in the Knight era with, you know, not the same person leading your team in scoring every night. Everybody stepping up and you know, looking at the best matchup and probably not seeing the same 5 kids start every game like you did maybe more in the Crean era, where, you know, you pretty much had a standard starting 5 that, you know, he thought he could make people match up with IU. But I think with Archie, you're going to see different kids that are better, the best combination to take on the opponent that you're playing on that given night, and it's not always going to be the same 5 kids. And I like that. I think that's good resource utilization, which I think is strong. I think that's what builds great, you know, high-performing teams. And I know that's what Coach Miller's trying to do in Bloomington, is build a high-performing team. And the more resource utilization he can get, the more strong he's going to be in depth-wise and be able to absorb, you know, an injury or next player up if somebody does get hurt, you know, and go from there. So.
Well, and I think that's the great thing about the game. Every 2 or 3 days, you've kind of got to develop a deep roster. And when you get to March, I mean, you play a conference tournament where you might be playing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then you get the NCAA tournament where you're going to play 2 games in 3 days. I mean, it always helps to be 10 players deep.
No, and there's a lot to be said for that. You're exactly right, and I like that about in looking over the schedule that the way it's built right now is that we do have this virtually every second or third day now they're going to have a game. And exactly what you said, you're going to have to play a lot of players. You're exactly right. A lot of players are going to step up. You're going to see a diversity of basketball teams with different, you know, strengths and weaknesses to go against. You're going to find a game like Indiana State that's going to be, you know, more of an emotional game. And then you may come more against the Seton Hall, which is going to be more of an athletic game. You know, Seton Hall is very athletic basketball team. They're a more seasoned team than we are, and we're going to have to up our athleticism to play against a team like that. So it's going to put your team in a bunch of different situations. You're right. It's going to bode well, and everything always builds toward the tournament. I mean, in any good college basketball program, everything you're doing throughout the course of the season is building toward the dance. So anything you can accomplish right now, and even if it is with a little bit of a lesser opponent, you know, there's still other avenues that you're pursuing and other things you're testing out on your basketball team right now. So it's well thought out. I don't know that this is all put together by Coach Miller to be done this way. I don't know if he's had that much leeway to do it yet, but as I look at the season begin to unfold now and we starting to see really what the heart is of this basketball team, it's I like the way things are unfolding early in the preseason. I like our schedule better, looking at some things other that we've talked about, and I think it's really going to build toward, you know, November 29th, a really high-end, you know, tournament caliber game against Duke, just to kind of give us a barometer as to where we stand at that point in time. And then we get into the Big Ten season, which is the grind. I mean, in the Big Ten, there's a grind. I mean, it's a quality opponent for the rest of the season. You know, after Duke, you know, Indiana doesn't play, or, you know, before Duke, starting with Duke, they don't play another weak opponent the rest of the season. Any team that makes the dance is a good basketball team.
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely look forward to this season. I look forward to this show with you. I think it's going to be very interesting. I think there's a chance that IU could surprise some people. I want to remind everybody, Steve, that they can find us on thegruelingtruth.net. You can find all these shows on iHeart, Spreaker, iTunes, Stitcher. Everywhere you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So, Steve, any final closing words of wisdom for the fans?
No, just, again, you know, manage your expectations and be patient with this basketball team. Archie Miller is a good basketball coach. He's a proven basketball coach, but the old adage, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's going to take some time. He still has a lot of recruiting to do to bring his style of player into this program. And I would think if all things keep going in the same direction, in 3 to 4 years, we should be relevant toward, a Final Four team. And then you get to the Final Four, it's a crapshoot from there. It truly is a crapshoot. All 4 teams that get to any Final Four are capable of winning it. That's why they're there. They survived a lot. But be patient. My expectations are right now remain steadfast that I expect this team to be in the tournament this year. I think that's a very realistic goal for the fans and for this basketball team, is to play well enough throughout the course of the year, and most importantly to the selection committee, show improvement. You don't have to have a 90% winning record if you play well all year. You continue to show improvement and show that you're relevant in the dance. And I think those are key things that Miller should be looking to do this year. And I think anything less than that, and we'll be underachieving. That's my early prognostication. Anything less than that, we'll be underachieving by any measure, because they are good athletes. They are well coached. They do have tradition and history, and they do have fan base. And they've got 99% of the things going good for them, and they'll continue to build. The big thing now is keep healthy. Keep healthy and keep building.
All right. Very good, Steve. We're going to wrap up the show tonight. We'll be back here in the next day or two to talk about the next game against Howard. I want to remind everybody, grillingtruth.net. Once again, you can follow us on Twitter at grillingtruth. Steve, you got a Twitter?
Yes, I have a Twitter. At srisley34.
So if you have any questions for Steve or for me, you can go to Steve's Twitter, or you can go to @grillingtruth, ask us whatever. And there's also the significant possibility that we will be able to do this live here sometime in the next few days, where we'll be able to take callers. Make sure you check out all the Grilling Truth stuff. Today I interviewed Charles Learson, who was the writer of Ty Cobb, A Terrible Beauty. It's on the New York Times bestseller list. He's written books he wrote a book with Donald Trump. He wrote the biography for Chuck Yeager, but he was a great guy. He was a great guest. Make sure you check that out. Check out our NFL Pick'em show, which we had the other night. Our CFL Pick'em show with 4-time Grey Cup champion Robert Drummond. So make sure you go to iTunes and download the iTunes app for our show also, so you can carry us with you on your phone. So for Steve Risley, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.